All right, everybody. Happy Wednesday. It is good to virtually see you here tonight, and it's good to be back for our Wednesday night Bible studies. Past couple weeks, Pastor Justin did a great job, but I'm excited to be back with you tonight and to be back home. And had a great Sunday on Sunday. Forgive me, I got a little bit of a runny nose. If I wipe my nose, I apologize. But had a great Sunday in church, continuing in our Romans 8 series, and learned about the change that can take place due to the Spirit's indwelling of the believer. And so if you missed that, jump on the live stream on YouTube there or Facebook. You should be able to find that and catch up. Next week, we'll continue in our study of Romans 8. And so I'm really excited about jumping into that on Sunday morning as well. A couple of prayer requests. We want to continue to be praying for each other as a church family. We want to continue to pray for Anne-Marie Mallon. She's been hospitalized recently with some health difficulties. Pray for her and Bob. I want to pray for Clark Belmay with a recent cancer diagnosis there as well. A lot of people in our church are going through difficult times right now. We want to be a church family, right? That's what we call ourselves. We want to be it, a church family, and be there to support one another, to encourage each other, to pray for one another. And I know that you guys will continue to do that. And a lot of wonderful things happening in our church, but we don't want to forget about those that are maybe going through a difficult time right now. In the midst of all the celebration what is going on, there's some real pain and hurt going on out there too. And continue to pray for those who may be battling COVID. Many of our church family are starting the process of beginning to come back to Sunday services. So if that's you, I'm sorry. We look forward to having you back soon. I know many of you are waiting for the vaccination to come available for your age group or different things. And there's a million different opinions on all of this stuff. All that I can say is we're looking forward to having everyone back with us really soon. And hopefully, Lord willing, we're getting close to the end of all this and be able to have some semblance of a new normal here pretty soon. But we're really excited to have those that are starting to make their way back. It's hard to believe we're about a month from Easter right now. Easter is a little bit early this year, the first Sunday of April. So we're looking forward to that date. Mark it on your calendar there. I think it's April. I think it's the 3rd. I should pull up my calendar here. No, the first Sunday of April. I know that. But 2 services on that special day. We'll probably have you register for that Sunday just because it is a more highly attended service, just to make sure that we have some reasonable social distancing going on. And we're going to do our best to celebrate the Lord's resurrection and, forget about what's going on in our world for a day and celebrate what God's doing. But we also want to make sure that people around us are comfortable on that day as well. So stay tuned for updates on that. We're still kind of making plans about what all we're going to be able to do and different things. So kind of stay tuned. But don't forget that Sunday we'll have Easter services. And the Friday right before we'll have a Good Friday service that Friday night. I believe it's 6:30 that Friday as well. And really kind of a special time of reflection for us to look back on the sacrifice of Christ that made the resurrection possible, right? So mark those things on your calendar. It is hard to believe that they're coming up that soon. If you have a Bible with you, let's go together to 1 Samuel 22. 1 Samuel 22 will continue in our study of the life of David. 1 Samuel 22. David, where we left him about almost like a month ago, it feels like now, where we left him has been running for his life from Saul. We saw kind of the final moment where he says goodbye to his friend Jonathan, and he just knows that now he's kind of a runaway. He's kind of a fugitive running for his life away from the king, even as he is himself the future king. So a really interesting time period in David's life. He is just kind of running back and forth like a fox running away from the hounds. David is running from his life from King Saul. He fled to Michal, if you remember, first his wife, then to Samuel, his mentor, then to Jonathan, his best friend. All the while, Saul is chasing him from one spot to the next. He kind of darts back and forth through all of his confidants until David finally is at refuge with his enemies, the Philistines. The same group of people from which he killed their champion, he's now finding refuge with them. And he went from being Israel's hero who would have a hard time walking through the streets of Jerusalem without being celebrated or cheered on, without feeling pats on his back or a hug or a thank you. David is now Israel's most wanted fugitive, running from the king, ducking down back alleys, fearing someone coming behind him and capturing him or stabbing him in the back. What a change has gone on in the life of David. Where could he go? Where could he go? His home is under surveillance. Most of the people in Israel knew him by sight. He's one of the most famous, if not the most famous person in Israel outside of King Saul. The Philistines even recognized him, right? Aren't you the guy that killed Goliath? He's probably lonely. He's I'm sure discouraged. David crawled into the only hiding place that he could find, and that's where we find him in 1 Samuel 22, verse number 1. It says, David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. David is now living in a cave. In a cave. From Goliath, from celebration to a cave dweller. How did this happen? How did this happen? Well, all of the crutches we saw of his life have been taken away. Everything that he could lean on for support, his family, his friends, his mentors, they've all been removed from him. And he now is finding himself within the walls of a dark, rocky cavern. At the end of his resources, with no one else to turn to, he composed one of the most beautiful psalms, I think, in the book of Psalms. If you go there with me, Psalm 142, he composes from this cave. I should have had it open. I apologize. Psalm 142. Yeah, I'm sorry. Computer's been fritzing out on me here. Psalm 142, David writes while he's in the cave. It says, I cried unto the Lord with my voice. With my voice unto the Lord did I make my supplication. I poured out my complaint before him. I showed before him all of my trouble. That's a good thing to do. When you've been accused, when you're in trouble, you lay it out before the Lord. We see Hezekiah doing that with the king of Assyria's threats and blaspheming of God. He takes the letter and lays it out before the Lord. That's what David does. He shows him all of his trouble. When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, then thou knewest my path. In the way wherein I walked, they've laid a snare for me. He said, I looked at my right hand, and behold, there was no man that would know me. Refuge failed me. Nobody cared for my soul. So what did he do? He said, I cried unto the Lord. I said, thou art my refuge and my portion in the land of the living. Attend unto my cry. Attend unto my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors. Humanly speaking, David had very little at this point to live for. The glitter of fame and fortune had turned to dreariness and drab. His life as Israel's hero had left him with a rock for a pillow and a heart full of turmoil. He says, there's no escape for me. There's no refuge for me. Nobody cares about me. Literally, verse number 4, you ever felt that way? No man cared for my soul. Nobody cares about me. Nobody cares about me. Nobody cares if I'm alive, if I'm not. Nobody cares if I'm here, if I'm not. No man cared for my soul. So what did he do? He says, I cried out to thee, O Lord. I cried out to the Lord. Said, you're my refuge. You're my portion in the land of the living. So listen to me. He says, I'm being brought low. Attend unto my cry. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they're stronger than I am. He says, bring my soul out of prison, that I will praise you. The righteous shall compass me about, for thou shalt deal bountifully with me. What a great example to us here from David. We learn that being a person after God's own heart doesn't mean never experiencing the dark moments of caverns. Being a man who desires to please the Lord, or woman who desires to honor the Lord, doesn't mean that your life will never bring you to dark moments, will not ever bring you to lonely moments or discouraging moments. What being a man after God's own heart or woman after God's own heart means is rather being able to trust that God's light is there in the darkness. And that when you can't see any temporal hope, that you have the God of all hope. So he's brought to this cavern. In this cave, he expresses to God his hurt and his pain and his loneliness. He expresses how he feels like nobody cares about him, how, just these honest, raw feelings before the Lord. And then what does he say? You know what? I'm going to cry unto thee because you're my refuge. You're my portion. I know you'll hear me when I cry. I know you'll hear me when I pray. I'm praying for deliverance. I'm praying for freedom. I'm praying for family and friends, the righteous, to surround me. I'm praying that I will be brought forth and dealt bountifully with. He takes his burden to the Lord. So we see the cave, but I think next we see the challenge. The challenge. As David sought refuge within the Lord, what does Moses say? Hide me in the cleft, right? Literally, David's the same way. He's being hidden in the cleft of this cave. God had brought people around him to encourage him. Look what happens in verse number 1. It says, David departed thence and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brethren and all his fathers heard it, they went down thither to him. There's this group of people that come. There's this blessing within the challenge of brotherhood, of sisterhood, of family. God gathered David's family all around him. The same brothers that stood ahead of David to receive Samuel's anointing. The same brothers who mocked David when he came to the battlefield when he killed Goliath. The same brothers are standing behind him in his moment of his greatest need. God then, in verse number 2, says, and everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them. And there were with him, look at this, about 400 men. 400 men who looked to David for leadership, who looked to David as their ruler, as their leader. So he's gathered around him with fellow immediate family, and then now this new extended family who's looking to him for leadership and supporting him. The 400 people and 400 men who joined David at the cave were experiencing like the fallout of Saul's reign. Some, it says, were staggering under the pressure and the stress. Others were drowning in debt due to Saul's knee-jerk reaction of high taxation. Others were bitter of soul based on being mistreated, based on being wronged. So they sought out the national hero who had been similarly abused by Saul, who had been cast away like they had been by their ruler. And David welcomed them and provided the leadership that they needed. These are people that were hurting, and they went to David for support, and they found it. In David's darkest hour, God gave him a ministry of helping men like him who had been worn down in a very similar way that he was. Their spirits could have soured to the point where they're, forming plans of violent revolution, right? Let's get rid of this guy. Let's kill this guy. But David keeps his eyes on God and begins to instill character and direction in the lives of those who are coming to him. Don't forget, David is also being mistreated. David's not just leading a group of mistreated people. David is one of the mistreated people himself. And yet in this moment, he's choosing to care for and support and point these men's eyes towards the Lord. He trained them to be mighty warriors. You'll see this in 1 Chronicles 11 if you want to check it out. Their number increased from 400 to 600. We'll see in 1 Samuel 23. He accepts this call of leadership and begins to form and mentor and train these men to keep their eyes on God. And then we see a change. We see a change. Out of his cave, David emerges with a greater understanding of God's mercy, with a greater understanding of God's purpose for his life. How did this change? How did it go from desperation to leadership? How did it go from loneliness to leadership? How did it go from being mistreated to ministering? I think three things happened. Three things happened in this cave that took him from loneliness to leadership. And there's three reasons, and he wrote about them in that Psalm 142. The first one was he was hurt enough to admit his need. He was hurt enough to admit his need. In Psalm 142, David fell on his face before God. He openly expresses his fear. He expresses his loneliness. Do you remember the rawness of Psalm 142 we just read? He says, my spirit is overwhelmed within me. They've laid traps for me. No one cares for me. David knew that he couldn't honor God by pretending that everything was okay. And maybe that's the message for some of you tonight. Maybe you've just been pretending that everything is okay in your relationship with God. When you're afraid, when you're hurting, when you have been mistreated, when you've been abused, and you're choosing to put on a face or a mask before your Savior and your Creator, you have to admit your need when you're hurt. We're not more spiritual by denying hurts, by covering them up with a, praise the Lord and a smile. We're not more spiritual for doing that. God can handle our real needs. He tells us to cast all of our cares upon him because he cares for us, right? Take our real burdens, take our real hurts, take our real loneliness, take our real sadness, our burdens, our hurts, and cast them on the Lord. David is honest enough to admit his need. But secondly, he was hurt enough to admit his need. Secondly, he was honest enough to cry for help. Another psalm he wrote about this time was Psalm 57. We'll go there. Psalm 57. I'll get there faster than last time, right? Psalm 57. He rises to his knees. This is also written he's in the cave. He says, be gracious, be merciful unto me, O God, be merciful unto me. For my soul trusteth in you. Yea, in the shadow of thy wings will I make my refuge, until these calamities be past. I will cry unto God most high, and to the God that performeth all things for me, and he shall send from heaven, and save me from the reproach of him that would swallow me up. God shall send forth his mercy and his truth. My soul, he says, is among lions. And I lie even among them that are set on fire, even the sons of men whose teeth are spears and arrows, their tongue as sharp as a sword. But be thou exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let thy glory be above all the earth. He was hurt enough to admit his need, and he was honest enough to cry for help. It's like this cry of desperation that then leads to a declaration of dependence. Does that make sense? It's a cry of desperate need that leads David to declare his dependence upon God. I think this psalm captures David's trust in God's goodness. He says, you're merciful to me, God. You're gracious to me. You know that it's really easy to lose sight of that in pain? I really see in Psalm 57, David focusing on two things: God's mercy and God's care. What do we doubt when we're going through hard times? Usually God's graciousness, God's mercy to us, and God's care of us. But what does David say? No, he's preaching to himself. Again, I'll take my refuge under your wings, to the God who accomplishes all things for me, the God who cares for me. He will send from heaven and save me. He was hurt enough to admit his need. He was honest enough to cry for help. And then thirdly, he was humble enough to learn. He was humble enough to learn. Throughout his life, David has tasted God's deliverance. Over and over and over again. And the memory of that taste lingers with you. Even in life's, greatest pains, and sufferings, shortly before fleeing to this cave, when he was in the Philistines camp and he's faking like he's crazy, right? What a low moment for him. David shows his teachable spirit. In Psalm 142, he falls on his face before God. In Psalm 57, he rises to his knees. And it seems as though he stands when we see in Psalm 34. Let's go there really quick. Psalm 34, I love this. Psalm 34. I will bless the Lord at all times, he says. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make its boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear it and rejoice. Oh, magnify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. They looked unto him, and they were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. The poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him and delivereth them. Oh, taste and see, he says, that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him. The young lions do lack and suffer hunger, but they that seek the Lord shall not want any good thing. Verse 19, he says, many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivereth him out of them all. Verse 22, the Lord redeemeth the soul of his servants, and none of them that trust in him shall be made desolate. He's hurt enough to admit his need. He's honest enough to cry for help. And he's humble enough to learn from God. It's like he went from on his face, admitting his need for God, to on his knees seeking his help, to standing with hands raised, ready to receive from the goodness of God. Most likely, you and I will never have to take refuge from an angry king. I hope. But as God's child, you will need to flee from all sorts of enemies. You have to flee from temptations, from weaknesses, from those who would like to trample your faith. When you're faced with an enemy, remember that God has a secret place for you. A place of protection, a place of comfort, a place of direction for your life. He's going to take you from that broken individual face down on the earth looking up to him to the one who's now standing ready to receive the goodness of God as he gives you a new renewed vision for what your life is going to be like, for what this future holds for you. Just like he did for David in this cave, he's going to give you a song of deliverance in your heart, a song of freedom, that if you'll trust as David did in God's love for you, he will provide a way of escape. A cave could be really any place of escape that offers protection from life's hostilities. When troubles pelt us like hail and the dark clouds of doubt and grief, or enemies' words or depression seek to cover us, we run to our places of refuge. We feel safe in our caves. We feel safe in those places, burrowed in the heart of a mountain, surrounded by walls of stone. And for David and for us, hiding places can be valuable. They can provide the respite that we need to go out to face the world again. We have to realize that when we are in moments of brokenness and fleeing to the cave, the purpose is for us to, in that hiding place, is to be healed, to be restored, to be helped, but then to exit. And we'll continue with David's exit as we look at it next Wednesday evening. But thank you guys for being with us tonight. Don't forget, okay, Sunday we'll be back in Romans 8 as we continue in that study on the gospel-shaped life. I'm really excited to continue with that study with you on Sunday morning. Saturday, we'll have a work day from 10 to 1, and you would like to come out and help us continue to make progress on the kids wing. Every week, making a little bit of progress, moving towards the goal of getting that all set up here in the not too distant future for the next generation of our church. And 10 to 1 on Saturday, you can let Pastor Justin know if you'd like to be a part of that. And we'll be back together Sunday. If I have missed any announcements, forgive me. Yeah, Easter's coming up and Good Friday. Lots of good things. We're going to have a baptism service not too far in the distant future either. So if you're interested in taking that next step of identifying with Christ publicly through baptism, let us know that as well. We'll be reaching out to some of you about taking that next step. I'm really excited for those who make that decision as well. If I can help you, shoot me a message, shoot me an email, contact me in some way. We'd love to be a blessing to you. If not, we'll see you back Sunday morning and look forward to continuing to worship together. God bless, guys. Hope you have a great rest of your night.